Welcome to the Inspiration North podcast, inspiring stories from inspirational people and how they found their passion, their true north. I'm James Eves.
And I'm Michelle Minikin, and this is the Inspiration North podcast.
Today's episode, How to Be More Pirate, with Alex Barker. We talk about having childhood dreams of exploration, her initial skepticism of Be More Pirate, but this benefiting the movement, and how her first book was a little bit shit.
Alex is a speaker, facilitator, writer and community builder, and a pirate captain. She joined Sam in 2019 to give life to Be More Pirate as something beyond a book. Before piracy, she was communications manager at the RSA and has spent a decade or so in the non-profit sector, building networks and supporting social entrepreneurs. Alex leads the network and would like nothing more than to see a less conventional approach to social change taking root. In September 2020, Alex and Sam's new book, How to Be More Pirate, was published. An update on the original, which dives much deeper into how to effectively rebel and rewrite the rules. So, Alex, thank you ever so much for finally agreeing to come on the Inspiration North podcast. How are you today?
I'm good. That makes it sound like I didn't agree for a really long time.
It's probably because we didn't explicitly ask you. We were just hinting for you for like months.
I did not pick that up. Thank you. It's a real pleasure. You know how much I love you guys.
Oh, we love you too.
I was thinking back, you were probably one of the last humans we saw in real life. Last year in Manchester.
Oh, I did.
Yeah, it's true.
When was that? February,
March,
I don't know. It was like the last few days before lockdown started.
Yeah.
Whenever that was.
That was
a long
like
time.
a week, yeah. That was, I don't know, we'd scheduled like 3 events in that week up in Manchester. And then everything just started to like collapse, but nobody really had the awareness of it at the time.
Yeah.
Like, oh, there's this thing happening, but we're going to carry on as usual. And then suddenly everything stopped. I was quite grateful at the time because I was like, great, I can write this book now properly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. Because it's like almost a year ago now that we're not being allowed out.
God, I did a really bad thing last night of starting to watch. There's a new program on, I think it's Amazon Prime. It's Songbird, which is like about coronavirus in 5 years' time, where there's a mutant strain that's evolved and we've been in lockdown for 5 years. I mean, why would I do that to myself?
It's like, COVID anxiety gone up 1,000%.
I don't know. I quite like apocalyptic dramas.
So do I. Yeah, I was explaining the day after tomorrow to Oliver. It's like, climate change and it gets this bad. James was talking about the jet stream not working. I was like, we need to watch this film. James was like, I can't watch it. We would sleep for weeks.
I remember when I watched it, I think I lived in France at the time, and I thought, I'm going to sell everything I own and move to North Africa. It was end of the world type scenario. So I might as well go and live somewhere warm, not have any assets to my name, because they'll all be underwater. So
we do live north of the wall, so winter is coming, / is here at the moment, so...
Yeah, winter is coming. We all go in those cycles of sort of thinking about just going off the grid and just could I just do this entirely differently, and sort of coming back round to where you are.
Yes, would we miss McDonald's too much? I'm sure we could live without it. Okie dokie. So, first sort of question, pretty much our only normal question, is did you know what you wanted to be when you grew up?
Well, depends how far back you want to go.
I'll take us all the way.
I think probably my first idea was mermaid, which obviously was a physical impossibility. But I think then seriously, probably when I was around 7 or something, I wanted to quite seriously be a member of the famous five, and that evolved into maybe I could be a detective. I definitely always had like a craving for mystery and adventure, and what I now know to be, a life that doesn't have much routine or is quite exciting, I suppose. I'd do, I'd make up my own mysteries. I, in fact, at one point tried to dig a tunnel at the bottom of my garden to sort of, because, they're in the early Famous Five books, they have all these smuggler tunnels and where they find treasure. And so I had this, craving when I was younger to be, to do something along those lines. And then I think it evolved as I actually started to develop skills. I was always really sporty. So, and I did ballet from when I was really young. So I imagined I'd be some kind of dancer or performer of some kind. And I always wanted to be in talent shows. And that's at the point where I think you don't have any fear or consciousness of what other people think of you. I mean, I used to put on concert after concert for my parents. I think probably a lot of kids do that, but I'd rope my brother and sister in. They were like my minions. And I just, be like, you play the drum. and then we'd put on shows. So those were my first ideas really about what I wanted to be. I didn't have any long held dreams about a real career because I didn't really know what a real career was, and no one ever corrected me either. And my parents, and it's funny, my parents never encouraged us to do what they did. In fact, they sort of did the opposite. My dad's a solicitor, and he was almost very adamant that we didn't go into law and we did something creative. I think he always felt that a life where you can be creative is the most fulfilling. And my mum is a teacher, and she never really said, teach. I mean, I think later down the line, as we got through university and we were in a financial crisis, I think she sort of said, maybe you could do teaching as a sort of just, a sense of stability but none of us were ever inclined that way. So in fact, my brother, my sister and I think are all have always preferred the creative industries and sort of veered towards that for jobs. So, and I always wanted to travel as well. So anything that involved travel, I looked up lots and lots of career options that would involve, being able to go places, go to new places. And I think that probably goes back to my original childhood dreams of just exploration, just always wanting to go and find new things. So I think that's probably, and in a weird way, I've ended up there.
You got there eventually.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I mean, with lots and lots of detours, obviously. Lots of detours in all directions, but I suppose that's part of the beauty of it.
Yeah. So how did you start then? What was your first detour, say, out of university, if that's where we're up to? What did you first decide to go into?
Yeah, when I came out of university, well, actually, I went travelling for sort of 6 months after I finished did a master's degree in international relations, really focused on Middle East politics. Kind of by accident, I didn't really know what I was doing. I just picked some stuff and thought that sounds interesting. And then I got really into it and thought, but I've always had this sense that this reservation, which prevails today, that you can't really understand things effectively just from theory and books. There's a translation that happens in an academic translating the situation to you. So I wanted to go and understand a bit more about what it was like in the places I was studying, perhaps more from a frontline or a person-centered perspective. Not that I really, again, there was a problem there because I went off to Turkey, and this was long before the war in Syria and all of the, I say it wasn't long before, it was about a year before the Arab Spring. So you could travel quite easily around the Middle East. So we took an overland trip from the southern borders of Turkey through Syria into sort of Lebanon and Jordan and Egypt, Israel, Palestine. And I can't speak Arabic or Hebrew, so there was an obvious barrier there. But you can still. I still felt that I was attempting to understand something from a sort of experiential perspective. Like I wanted to viscerally feel what it was like. And when I came back, I did a sort of a month or so working on a permaculture farm in a town called Beitzahur, which is near Bethlehem. And it's very interesting now when I think about some of the climate change work I do now and the debates around sustainability, but they were trying to help the local people be sustainable through permaculture. But it was a sort of kind of anarchist farm, and people would just come and go, and it was very open and welcoming that you could come and you would be able to get bored so long as you helped do something on the farm, and we would prune the olive trees and empty the compost toilet, clean the house, etc. And then I got back, and I guess that was just I didn't really make sense of it that much at the time because there was so much going on, and essentially you were in the Palestinian territories and there was always conflict going on. There were always protests, demonstrations, there were raids in the night. So you were in the middle of essentially a conflict zone. And I felt very uncomfortable about what I was doing there, really. Mm-hmm. What was I doing there? Should I be there? But I felt that I was learning something. So when I came back, I thought, well, I got to do something that's going to help the world. So broad and vague and undirected and naive. But I felt very strongly that it was important to be contributing in a positive way, not contributing to systems that were driving inequality in various ways. So I thought, okay, charity, that's the easiest and fastest way. That's what they're there to do. Mm-hmm. And so I just flung in lots of applications to work for charities and NGOs, and ended up with an amazing one, actually. I got into, went to work for somewhere called Global Citizen, which at the time was called Global Poverty Project. It's an Australian NGO, I believe, and it was just setting up a UK office. And so we really got to, I was working with the real founders of it, and they just were looking for an intern to help with the campaign side. And campaigns appealed to me because I felt that I was good at communication or storytelling. English literature was always my strong point, and I'd studied literature before the masters, so I felt that this was a blend of my knowledge and skills. So we did some amazing stuff. Like, I think back, I thought, God, I was really lucky. We interviewed a guy called Paul Collier, who wrote a book called The Bottom Billion, which is a brilliant book about poverty. But they were quite challenging about in what they were doing. They were really trying to change the narrative around poverty, extreme poverty. So they were doing lots of things to suggest that, to challenge the poverty porn that was very prevalent at the time, that was somewhat driven by things like comic relief. And they said, Africa isn't this mass of starving children. There's entrepreneurship here. There's incredible stuff going on. And we need to highlight those stories and shift from sympathy to empathy. And I thought, wow, that's exactly what we need to do. And so I really felt on board with what they were doing. It was a really positive experience. And I read a book. I remember reading a book called Half the Sky that we were doing a campaign around, which was all about gender inequality. And it's a mind-blowing book. It opened my eyes to, I think it was just, there were so many things in there I just had no idea about. And they were kind of simultaneously depressing and empowering at the same time. These stories of women all around the world who really suffered through gender inequality, but had managed to sort of find an anchor of empowerment somehow and challenge things. And it really changed my perception. And it also made me realize that slavery still existed because women are enslaved and in various scenarios. So I guess it would, if I think back to now where I am with Pirates, there was lots of revelations in that period that made me understand how systemic inequality is driven and why it happens and how difficult it is to change it. So I guess at the end of it, I'd love to say that. I was like, yes, okay, I know what I'm doing now. I didn't, because I think it was actually overwhelming. And I had this personal impetus, obviously, to earn some money and move out of my parents' house, which wasn't making me particularly happy. And I was still waitressing at the time, and I felt like I should have moved on from that. And so, and my internship wasn't paying me, so I then moved on to another internship that paid me little, but wasn't nearly as enjoyable. And it was, there was a real height of the financial crisis, and I think I had a confidence crisis, because I felt that I'd ticked every box I could have possibly ticked, and yet where had it got me? So it was a sense of like the system's failing me, but then not wanting to be all woe is me, because I was pretty privileged. I just felt that I should have been able to get a job in something that I wanted to do, and I couldn't, or it didn't feel easier, and I could feel my sense of self being diminished. So yeah, I took detours to think of ways around it. I always wanted to write a bit as well. That was just a side hobby. And I ended up, thought, well, if I can write if I can allow myself enough time to write, maybe I could take a job that does something else, that's a sort of balance. So I trained, I say trained, that's a lie. I started to a course to be a fitness instructor, because I thought, well, I'm quite sporty. This is also ignoring the fact that I would go out and drinking all the time, like have lots of fun. It wasn't like I was living this very Puritan lifestyle, and definitely probably wasn't in the position to really advise people. But it was an experiment. I did the written bit of the course, and then I went to the day-long kind of workshop and just felt really out of place, and like this wasn't the right thing for me. And so I sort of gave up on the idea, and when it came to do the practical exam, I really hadn't prepared. And I brought my friend along to be my you have to bring someone to demonstrate that you know how to use the gym equipment, and she was really hungover. And she said, you better not make me run. And I was like, no, you literally just have to step on the treadmill for like a minute. But the woman, the instructor, did make her run, and I thought, oh my God, she might throw up. So that was a disaster. But it was a kid. It's a good detour. Yeah. And it made me go, okay, this isn't for me. I just, you just lose faith for a while in the path. I just reverted back to the path I'd already kind of identified and gone. I just lost the resilience for a while, and now I'm gonna try again.
Yeah, it's good to try other things, isn't it? Though.
Yeah.
Because as much as it's not something you wanted to do, it's still a great realization. I didn't want to do this. What's next? So you're going to say something? Yeah,
I'd say it's like your career, I suppose. You tried lots of things that you didn't want to do before you found out what you wanted to do. So it's a way of trial and error.
But at the time when you're 24, you don't feel that way. You feel like I should be further ahead. You don't have that benefit, I think, I guess I didn't anyway have confidence enough to know that this was just a sort of trial and error process. Because also I look back now and I realize a lot of it was to do with schooling. I went to a grammar school, and there was definitely an environment in which you were primed to succeed at many things at once, and continually be going on an uphill trajectory. Every year I did my next ballet exam, my next piano exam, my next grades, or whatever. So when this continual progression just halted, I just lost my sense of self.
I think it's quite common, isn't it?
Well, yeah, we've been reading quite a lot recently about that quarter life crisis as well. And, we talk a bit amongst ourselves with Tara Moore and the fact that schooling, it doesn't teach you how to stand up to authority or challenge the status quo. It teaches you how to adapt to multiple different authority figures and please them. So once that sort of structure falls away, particularly for women, I find it's almost, who am I, looking around to see who am I supposed to be pleasing now? And it's like me. It's like, oh, I've never done that before. It's like completely unlearning.
Yeah, absolutely. She's spot on with her observations. That about why women do well in school. And I love what she says around when she goes into the detail of why women particularly try to be agreeable, and partly because of the historical need to survive, and your agreeability or likability was really, I guess, predicted your outcomes, your life outcomes, whether you get a husband or whatever.
You end up being an old crone.
Yeah, exactly. The women that stepped out of line were not received
the witch wound.
Yeah, indeed. So, and how, and I thought it was really interesting the research she cites on how quickly we make decisions about whether someone is agreeable or not, and we take a lot longer to decide whether somebody is competent. So you've got much more lead-in time for competency, but agreeability is immediate. And there's so much of what she said that's brilliant, especially around language, because I said I love language, and I think it's a really, really easy thing to do to start to change your life and break rules and rewrite them, because it's quite an immediate thing to do, to just look at the way that you describe things, the way that you speak, and start to change it. So the advice she gives on how to be warm and connect with people whilst also being direct and not using these little phrases. I mean, I do it all the time, but I am very conscious of those phrases, like a little bit. And
just.
I
take just out. I write it in emails and I go sweep through it and take all the justs out.
Yeah.
Or I go the opposite end and have a really aggressive email, and James has to sort of like pare it back.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, do you need chilly boots, Michelle?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're having a bit of a 24-year-old crisis. What was the way out of that?
Time. I think that it's an interesting. I don't think that I immediately did get out of it. There were some moments that felt pivotal. I think that in terms of abandoning the ill-fated fitness pursuits, I spoke to my dad, someone I really admire, and he and has seen and I guess I perceive as very worldly, because he's been through a lot of things and has seen a lot of different perspectives on the world. And so he said, look, you've got three options. You can either disappear, find some remote corner of the globe where you don't have to deal with all this crap. He was very upfront with me. He's like, the world is corrupt and there is a hell of a lot of problems and stuff. And so you can disappear and go off, or you can just accept it and make a nice life for yourself. Go out, get a good job, earn some good money, build a family, or whatever that looks like for you. Or you can try and fight a corner somewhere. Just pick something, because that's what I think that I do. I represent people against the system. It's such a necessary and important part of, of justice, that every person is allowed representation. So, that really stuck with me, that idea that, okay, it's okay. You have to pick something to do. I can't say that that's what I immediately did, but it helped to somehow resolve the internal conflict I was having about what direction I should go in. So it made me stick with the idea as I tried to work in the voluntary sector. I'd look for organizations that I thought were doing good things. And I ended up, I wasn't fully out of any kind of real quarter life crisis. So I did two things at once. I got a job in a social care charity where it allowed me to learn a lot about, I guess, that frontline perspective that I thought was important. So I was almost like a kind of administrator, office manager, where I was organising all the social care workers for about 7 different supported living sites across London. So it was a bit a very intense bureaucratic job. And at the same time, I started writing a little book. I look back on it, and it's a bit shit. I mean, it's very shit. Well, I don't know. But, I just, because I'd also gotten into, I remember I went to a talk at something called Escape the City, which you'll be familiar with because it's in Be More Pirate. And this was about 10 years ago. And I went to a talk of a guy who'd self-published a book about his walk around Iceland. And he'd managed to leave his corporate job and do this trip. And his book had done really, really well. And I thought, well, maybe I could do that. Self-publishing was just becoming a bit of a boom. Mm. And it was all possible to just write a book, publish it on Amazon, do it all yourself. So I thought, okay, I'll have a go at this. Whatever happens, it'll be interesting. So I decided to write a short book about different people's experiences of living abroad. I thought, I know lots of people who've lived abroad, but in different ways, like expats, people who are sort of third culture kids, people who've just moved for various reasons, people who've moved through conflict. So I thought, well, if I just gather these perspectives, let's see what happens. So I did that. I wrote this short book and I self-published it. And it's probably hidden in the depths of the internet somewhere now. I think I buried it because I guess by the point that it was ready to go, I was really getting into the new job, and it was becoming very intense. And I just thought, I don't think I can keep the two things going simultaneously. It was starting to feel quite exhausting. And it's a lot to market a self-published book. I didn't really know what I was doing. And I think I sort of lost the impetus to do it. It was a process of writing it that I enjoyed. Although the interesting thing is I did reread the introduction a few months ago. I found it when I was cleaning up my desktop. And there's a line at the beginning which talks about how we need to how can we possibly understand the problems that are happening when we don't understand it from the people closest to the problems. And I cited the example of healthcare workers. And I think it's so funny that I've basically ended up back in that place, because that's very much part of the mutinies we see in healthcare and through Be More Pirate. This idea that policies and decisions are being made too far away from the people experiencing the issues, and that there needs to be this blend. So I felt like I was probably, a lot of those ideas were still very important to me. I just put it into this little book. But it was a good process to go through. And at the time, I again felt really disappointed with it. I was like, I thought that this would be my thing that I could do, and it would make me successful. And it just shows you, in a way, like it probably did, because I've essentially done a book like that now, just with a lot more experience and a much better quality writing.
You have to practice.
and a lot better platform to do it from. So so then I went through this I worked for a year at the social care charity, and I had a really bad experience actually there, which I'm not really going to go into. So that prompted me to leave, and I ended up working at the RSA, which is a social innovation charity, a think tank. So I suppose I went more into the foreground of social change in a way. I wanted to work there because I'd always watched their animations and thought they were really interesting and innovative, and thought this must be a really great environment to be in. But really, I was just looking for a way out of my other job as well. So it wasn't that strategic. I was like, I don't know. I feel like there was people who did graduate into that period of time when we were really in the financial crisis, the credit crunch period, will probably understand that frenzy of trying to fit yourself into any job possible. And I'm sure people today have exactly, who are coming out or applying for jobs post-university or post-school and don't feel that they have an experience. You just try to push yourself into any box you can. So, it was never really that strategic.
Sometimes you look back and see the common threads through everything. It's like, interesting.
Yeah, it wasn't planned, but if it was part of a plan, all those little experiences built on one another to really get to where you are now, isn't it? It's funny.
Yeah.
So, And then you saw an advert.
Well, yes. Yeah, I mean, definitely later. Yeah, I'd taken a sabbatical from the RSA at this point because I'd gotten myself into, I'd gotten myself into a bit of a work hole. It's like again, it comes back to what we were talking about with Tara Moore, a tendency to want to prove yourself by overworking because that's the only value you know how to put on yourself, I think. And I'd just grown up thinking that was how I would be valuable. So I'd taken on a second job on a Saturday. I had also taken a secondment from my current job in the RSA. So I was sort of then managing someone who was doing my normal job and then also working only on GDPR, which is pretty boring. But I don't know, it was a good challenge at the time. So once GDPR was implemented, or the policies were implemented, I was like, right, I'm taking a break. Took a 5-month sabbatical. That was the plan. Went off to do some traveling. And again, I guess maybe I never got out of the crisis in the first place, but I think that I just worked in a steady job for a really long time. Felt that I'd learned lots and lots of skills, gained lots of knowledge, was good at what I did, knew my field, but I didn't think that I was making any difference. You know, it was the opposite thing. I was like, I'm comfortable in my job and my skill set, but I'm just not. I don't think this is having any impact. This isn't what I signed up to do in the first place. So I needed to reroute myself back to those original purpose and values that I had in the beginning. I had no idea how to do it again, but this time I definitely had a really strong sense that that the problem was I needed to stop. Just need to stop doing what I was doing and let my mind and body rest, and that would work. I would figure it out, and I didn't need to frantically find the next thing. So the first time I wrote down not, okay, what job is next, what role, what position, what industry I want to go into. I just wrote down the conditions that I want to have in my life, because that was what was missing. I'd missed a sense of adventure, spontaneity, I wanted it to be less routine. I mean, I literally every day left my house, went to Pret a Manger, went to my office, went back to Pret a Manger, went back to my office, went to the pub. And, it's not quite as bad as that, but it did feel very, very in a bubble. And and I wanted to be learning more and meeting people and connecting people. I just wrote down a load of stuff that I thought, this. And that was very clarifying. So I was also writing a novel at the time. So I thought that was a sort of just a fun side project to do. I suppose I, at the time, probably pinned some hopes on that, but I just needed a sense of focus. But I had much more trust that something would emerge, and it did. The first thing that happened, I was in Bali. I know it's a bit of a cliche, but one of my best friends does live there. So I went to visit her. And I know I'm like,
so all the good stories start.
Yeah.
It wasn't, I was in Bracknell High Street. And
I know. It does sound a bit, but that's what happened. I went to Bali and rested. And my friend who was living there took us on a little adventure off a volcano. I say, actually, do you know what? We never actually went up the volcano. I just looked at it. But we went to a different part of the island, and she described it as a micro-adventure. And I said, that's a really, really nice way of putting it. And she said, oh, it's not me. It's this guy, Alistair Humphreys, who I follow on Instagram. He's like an explorer and a writer. And I thought, oh, okay. I looked him up, followed him. And it was 2 or 3 days later, I'd signed up to job alerts from Escape the City because I always knew that they kind of have interesting stuff, just to see what was out there. And 2 days later, there was a job advert to be this guy, Alistair's intern. I looked at it and thought, this is perfect. He wanted somebody for 7 hours, roughly a week, totally remote. You can work from anywhere. And he wanted comms help. So it was things like help him edit his new book, rearrange his blog, all the stuff I'd done at the RSA. So I thought, I knew with certainty, I was like, this is the thing. And my friend at the time just totally discouraged me. She's like, I'm really glad you're excited about a new thing, but he'll get a lot of applications. she was, trying to not get my hopes up. But I don't know. I felt like, no, I feel this is the thing. I was glad to be excited about something. So applied, and then about 6 weeks later, I started working with him. We had a little Skype interview, and that was that really. And that was really fun. I just did it. It was a little bit of a side earner while and then I moved to Vietnam at this point. I decided to go off and do a bit of solo exploration. Yeah, and then this is a long-winded say.
No, it's great.
But pirates, but it to me it makes sense, and feels important. And then I was, and then I met this. I guess I met this journalist who was a war correspondent, and that really reminded me of all the original ideas I'd had when I was studying. And he was based in Baghdad, and had just come over to I was in Saigon at the time, and just come over for a holiday. And he really wanted to hang out with me a lot. And I was trying to, I was like, I'm writing my novel, leave me alone. But I ended up talking to him a lot, and he started talking about revolution and stuff. And I thought, I don't know, it definitely, those conversations felt important. It sparked something. And then, it was a few days later, I saw this advert again through Escape the City to be a right-hand pirate. And I thought, I read it, and I thought, immediately I was like, this is the thing that I'm going to do next, immediately. And I hadn't read Be More Pirate at the time. I'd actually put the book down after 2 pages because I thought it was too much about social change. And I didn't really trust anything that says how to take on the world and win, because I thought that's impossible. So I was initially quite skeptical, and then it was only when I saw the job advert that I thought, I've got to go back and read this book. And I did vaguely remember Sam because he'd come to do a talk at the RSA, but it had gone over my head because we had 3 or 4 authors come to talk a week. So and then I read it through and was like, okay, this is interesting. And the job again just felt that it would marry up all of the experience and knowledge that I'd gained at the RSA around building networks and what social change, how to do social change but do it differently. I could see the missing pieces of the puzzle. The stuff that had nagged at me that was missing at the RSA was there in Be More Pirate. The things about you can't change without a level of uncomfortability. It's impossible. And all the stuff that you guys get and know. So I mean, it's funny. It's so ironic now when I think about it. I wrote a job application. I wrote it out in written, and then on the advert he'd said, submit it in any way you want, obviously. And I thought, I better do something a bit more interesting. So maybe I'll do a video. But it was terrible. It was so terrible. I tried to record it 20 times and was like, this just isn't working. So in the end, I just wrote him an email. I said, I am a better writer than orator. Here you go. And I find it ironic now because I never envisaged that my job would involve speaking so much, being on camera so much, and all this stuff. But now I'm like, oh God. Anyway, so that's the story of how I came to Be More Pirate from that. And I went back. I just know inherently, I know that this is my sense of the right fit and purpose was so strong. I thought, there's no way I can't at least get an interview. And I went back to do the interview, and I given some tasks to do and did those. And I suppose I went in with a bit of a cavalier attitude. I just thought, I don't really care what this guy thinks. It sounds awful, but I just... It wasn't like that sense of, I'd lost in a way the sense of needing to please or be. I felt that was that's probably not what's wanted or needed from this anyway. So that approach that you usually go into job interviews with, where you're trying desperately to show them that you are it. I think that's not the attitude. I just need to present my ideas about this. And we had a great conversation, and I immediately thought, obviously, Sam was brilliant, and he's so candid and open. But I felt we would really work together well.
I love it in the How to Be More Pirate book, where he says in his chapter that he wrote that you were the only person that called bullshit on it.
I don't think I dared use the word bullshit at the time, but I did say,
It's all substance and all talk and no trousers, or whatever it was you said.
Yeah, I mean, I was deeply skeptical because it's a great. You can see the power of the marketing in it, and the the 5R structure, the framework. I thought was alliterative. I mean, that's a marketing tool in a way, and so. And I thought, I was going, you don't just rebel, then you rewrite, then you reorganize. There's a sense of the sequencing that felt too convenient, and when he'd written on the longer job description saying that he wanted to grow the community, and I was like, hang on, you just said growth is, you quoted Frederick Laloux telling you that growth for growth's sake is cancer. Mm-hmm. So what is it? What are we doing here? And also I very, very strongly knew and felt from having done networks from the point of growth, of going, we have to hit 300 new members a month. We have to hit, the newsletter has to grow. And that was the measure of success, when I knew that there was disengagement. I knew that people weren't, we weren't opening the stuff that we were churning out week on week. They didn't feel deeply connected to these ideas. Mm-hmm. And change doesn't happen if you don't feel deeply connected to the ideas that people are talking about. I'd rather have, which is kind of what I have now. I'd rather have 200 people who I know are invested in this and are doing something. And that's basically what we've done and what we see with Be More Pirate, than, 30,000 who kind of go, oh, okay, that's interesting. So that was just so important to me, that I knew the people, that there were relationships in place, because that's crew, isn't it? That's the whole point of pirates. Yeah, and I haven't changed my mind about any of it since the beginning. It's still integral, I think.
But now you're in charge.
I don't know what that means. Yeah, in charge. Yeah. I think perhaps over time, Sam and I are both very strong characters, and with lots of ideas, and we do obviously still work together, but on specific things. There's a lot that I feel I can do on my own, and although it's funny, I have the title of captain, but I very much feel that I am quartermaster in the role that I play, in that the quartermaster always looked after the crew, was very much about considering the dynamics within a crew, quelling conflict. Not that I have any conflicts to quell, but I definitely look at all the different elements of the network and think about, connections. I've often reflected that it is challenging to do the captaincy, which is the strategy and the vision and the getting the ambition of it, which I am doing at the moment. I'm easing into that more so, whereas I've been predominantly focused on the network and the quartermaster part till now.
And there's lots of plans afoot.
Yeah, I have got plans afoot. I'm not sure whether they're too early to reveal, though.
That's fine. A little bit of mystery and adventures there. It's good.
Yeah, I feel that, obviously it's been a horrific year, and I feel that I would be further ahead with some of this stuff had it not been for the pandemic. But I also feel that 2 years spending time building a network, getting to know people, understanding all the stuff that has gone into the new book around what are the common rules that people break and rewrite and what matters, and all of that is just a very, very important foundation. And now this year might be the time to start to galvanize around some bigger collective action and campaigns, which is where I'm heading. But to be revealed.
It's exciting.
It is.
I know we've had lots of conversations about sort of business structures recently. It's like how do we create a business structure that works for everybody, as opposed to having a hierarchy or having that associate model and all that sort of stuff. So we've had lots of conversations around that.
Yeah, that's it's very much the same. I am somewhat trying to organise Be More Pirate into what it emerges into, in the future without it defaulting back into the traditional ways of working and modes of working that we're used to. And I don't know, I've reflected a lot recently that, yes, this is how they win. It is because it's so much easier to default to the norm. Like, it's incredibly challenging to work in an emergent environment where you don't quite know what people's roles and responsibilities are. I think one of the most challenging things I find is how much I should lead people or direct, and how much I, allow for people to step into the space themselves. Striking that balance between agency and leadership, I think, is very hard when there's no parameters other than what you decide to define together. But I think that this is really worthwhile work to do, because we know that the other way ends up going down some quite dark paths. So yeah, there's lots and lots of people that I know through the network who are working on this and are committed to how do you work in a more networked way where people retain their autonomy. There's lots of different options. I don't particularly think that entirely flat structures at all times work. I think that there's a necessity for sometimes people to step up into leadership roles. I think that the difference is that they need to not be permanent. There needs to be, proper accountability, an ability to be fluid with it. And what does that look like? And that's different every time, depends on your environment and your culture. But yeah, so I think that's definitely something that's going to be one of the big challenges of the coming decades.
That's exciting, though. Okie dokie. So, have we missed anything? We've missed loads. We could talk to you for about 40 weeks.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else that's really relevant to the story. I don't know.
Yeah, but it's so fascinating that, Enid Blyton and Famous Five, and there's still that adventure and excitement and mystery and detective work as well, sort of coming to it all, and how you make an impact on the world. So
yeah, I think this year as well has been, it's been a big change for everybody, but it's been, in hindsight, very helpful, because I think it's given me a new layer of permission, because even though I'm freelance, I'm a pirate, and I'm, by all I guess most people from the outside would imagine that I just, I can sort of do what I want. I set my own agenda, and in theory I can, but the permission isn't external, it's internal. And that's the most significant thing. I have to unravel my own internal barriers. I get up and go, why do I always feel that I need to be doing this when I don't really need to necessarily do anything? And I've examined a lot of my perceptions around, work must always be hard, work must always be slightly boring, which I always find is intellectually easy to comprehend, but experientially difficult to change. So it's a process, but this year's been good for it, because I think the world has been given permission to stop. Like, the messaging has changed. We've gone, okay, you really are working through a very challenging, horrible, boring period of time. It's boring predominantly for me, I'd say, because so don't stop doing things the way that you've always done them, because you can't. I think I was going to say I'll go mad, but that's perhaps a bit unfair. I just I will definitely risk my mental health if I don't do it differently, and I'm sure that's the same for everyone. So yeah, long way of saying yes. The kind of, where we've arrived at is really just this year has been a bit of an accelerator for change as well.
Definitely. Okay, so we'll take that very deep thought and we'll raise it up to the most shallow of shallows and ask you some of our quick fire questions now. So James, do you want to take it away?
So question number 1, which fictional villain is your favourite?
Well, Snape from Harry Potter.
That's what I would have said.
Yeah, he's not the villain. Like, it's entirely profound that he is the anti-hero of the entire series. And I mean, I'm sure lots of people have said that it's not very, but I mean, I would obviously otherwise give a pirate, wouldn't I?
Captain Hook.
No, I mean, I just finished watching Black Sails, so I'm currently very into that. So yeah, I would pick any number of the pirates in that. Yeah, God. But Snape was the first one that came to mind because he's not really a villain in the end.
I still can't watch him when he, if I don't want to spoil it for everybody, but he does actually die in it. I still have to leave the room. I can't cope. So, yeah. He's my favourite as well. Okay, the next one. If you had a personal flag, what would be on it?
Very good question. Well, I kind of, God, I want to try think of something more original than what I'm inclined to say. But, you know, I always think of what's the modern equivalent of raising a flag is kind of tattoos, and I have two. So I suppose it would be those, although one is just writing. So, but the writing is about, the rose gives honey to the bees in Latin, so it'd probably be a rose of some kind, or a bee, something that encompasses that, because that is essentially what I have done. Well, I did it when I was pretty young.
It's cool. Okay.
And then the third question: have you ever seen anyone pull the "Do you know who I am" card?
I have. I've sort of. When I was younger, my dad did a lot of cases for footballers, and at one point we went backstage at Leeds United and met Rio Ferdinand, and he said, "Do you want my autograph?" Like immediately. Like I'm not sure if I knew really who he was, but that was a very like immediate. It wasn't quite "Do you know who I am?" but it was the expectation of that would be that. And it was funny. I remember I was trying to sat down, and Sven-Goran Eriksson, the then England manager, was sitting and was watching me very slowly steal sweets from this bowl. So that was nothing else to do. I can't remember how old I was. Probably quite young. So no, but I did have a really embarrassing one where I may as well tell this. Why not? I had gone to a friend's birthday party. It was an afternoon thing in a pub garden, so we, had lots of drinks. And in the evening, we were gathering for a dinner, and a few more people joined. And there was this one guy who kind of joined the group, and I, at that point, being fairly tipsy, so it was like, "Hey, like, nice to see you again." And I thought he was a guy that I had met at the same person's birthday the year before, and we chatted a lot. So I thought, nice to see him. And then the guy, my friend who was next to me, was like, "Oh, that's not the same person." I was like, "Oh, no, we do know each other. Like, we talked last year. Do you remember?" And he was like, "No, that's Matt Cardle from the X Factor." I was like, "Oh."
I know his face.
In fairness, he did look similar to the guy that I thought he was. Not my finest hour.
No, but nobody was harmed.
No.
Okay. So the question we ask everybody: if you could get in a time machine and go back and have a conversation with your 18-year-old self, what would you say to you?
This is actually a question I've been asked recently, and I think the answer is that all the stuff that you love now is never going to die. You're never going to. You'll be told, you'll grow out of this. This is a phase. You'll get your. I always used to be told I'd get the travel bug out of my system, and I just thought, and I assumed that I would, and I assumed that my desires would change, and that I would, and they did, and they haven't. They really fundamentally haven't. The things that really excited me and inspired me when I was 18 still do now. So even though you can, I think sometimes when you're trying towards something that you love, it can get exhausting, and it can become something you don't love. I'm sure anyone who's tried to do acting and professionally will understand that. but you just need to take time away from it, because that internal like desire and spark doesn't go. It's, you can't control what you desire. You just do. So don't follow it.
It's awesome. Thank you so much.
So the only with the pandemic, the love for travel, it's that joke, isn't it? If you've got the Lonely Planet guide to the kitchen and the Lonely Planet guide to the bathroom and the living room.
Yeah, I'm reading a really good book at the moment. It's called The Unlonely Planet. I have to send you the link because it's really good. Talking about creating congregation and community, but not obviously not secular, but it's quite interesting. But yeah, it's lots of interesting thoughts. So I'll send you it.
Thank you. So I thought that on the travel point, because you get asked a lot, if you like travel now, what do you do? But always, travel is just a means to an end, isn't it? There's a feeling underneath it that you're seeking. So if you just need to find different ways to access the feeling. And I remember talking to, I think it was when I was doing the work with Alistair a year before Be More Pirate, that I remember talking about it. This idea of adventure, like what are you getting at? And I think awe was the word that I landed on. I'm looking for awe. And so when places become too touristy, and I definitely experienced this in Vietnam. You go somewhere and you think it's going to be absolutely epic and awe-inspiring, and actually you're just kind of like bustling through selfies, and it becomes not awe-inspiring. So if you can incite that feeling of awe through some other means, geographically closer, you achieve the same ends.
Yeah, I think I find even reading accounts of adventure Ranulph finds, or watching anything like documentary, like I watched one about, I'd seen it before, but there's one about Yellowstone National Park and the changes through winter into spring, or anything from David Attenborough, and that always gives me awe, where you say, wow, such diversity in this micro environment, or whatever it is that's being discussed, and that always gives me that sense of, I don't know if I'd want to trek through the Amazon necessarily, but I've really enjoyed looking at all the bugs and things. So
brilliant.
Yeah.
So for our listeners, if you'd like to follow Alex or hear more about Be More Pirate, best place is the website bemorepirate.com, or try all the social platforms at Be More Pirate.
Cool. Well, thank you ever so much for taking the time out for your busy Tuesday. I almost forgot what day of the week it was. To chat with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It's lovely to be here with you.
Thanks everyone for listening. Check out all the show notes at inspirationnorth.com. Join us again for the next episode, when we'll be chatting to another inspirational person. If you like this, subscribe and tell your friends. If you didn't like this, subscribe anyway and tell everybody.